people. I mean, of course, there are implicit exceptions. You don't have a right to be free from unreasonable search and seizure if you're a prisoner in a federal prison. And likewise, you don't have a right to bear arms in a federal prison. But when it talks about the right of the people to peaceably to assemble,
how do you know the framers that's what the framers meant?
Well, I suppose you infer, for one thing, you infer that when they use the same term the same way by the same author, because it was James Madison who wrote the Bill of Rights, that he probably meant it the same way. And nobody disputes that the people in the Fourth Amendment, protecting the people from unreasonable searches and seizures, and the people from, in the First Amendment, the right to assemble. Nobody disputes that's a individual right. And in fact, in the Ninth Amendment, which reserves rights to the people, again, that's a reference to individual rights. And certainly that's the way the Constitution was interpreted from day one. In all the treatises, you know, St. George Tucker, who was the leading constitutional legal scholar of the first quarter century of the early American Republic, appointed to the federal courts by James Madison, his treatise explained the Second Amendment as a normal individual right. Good academic answer. All right, you had another question you wanted to bring up. What was that?
No, I just wasn't quite through with my statement.
Go right ahead.
Okay. The Heller ruling also clearly suggests that other gun laws less restrictive than the district's, whether federal or state, are entirely consistent with the Constitution. And to say that because we've always done it that way or we've never done it that way is not a totally valid scientific argument for calling it a plural noun or a singular noun. Just wish to point that out.
After this ruling, though, it is clear now that this is an individual right. I'm curious, what's the official...
It's clear that the individual right in the District of Columbia is that you may not keep, that you may keep a gun in your home. Did you guys see this today? Can't tell whether it's Post or Rocky. I read them both. That the District of Columbia is putting out a new law today to cover this situation. Have you seen that?
I have been reading about that, yes.
Yeah, they're going to comply with the U.S. ruling. The proposal maintains some of the city's strict gun guideline rules and adds more regulations.
All right.
Okay.
Bring it back. What was the Brady's campaign official reaction to the Heller gun case, the decision?
That it takes away some of the arguments of the gun rights lobby. For instance, the slippery slope argument, which has been so prevalent so many years. If we get one more regulation, we'll be going down the slippery slope to total gun confiscation, etc. And obviously, it has stopped that in its tracks.
Now, you want total gun confiscation, but does the Brady want?
Brady has not asked for that. The stated purpose of Brady at this point in time is to keep dangerous weapons out of the hand of dangerous people. So, and that could be guns, it could be, I mean, I'm just waiting for some Second Amendment right person to say, well, I get to have a bazooka now because that'll be helpful when I go to the militia. You know, I don't know how far this is going to go. It's such an evolving process that you'll never figure that out.
Bring over here. This was a ruling that was for federal law, not state law. Explain the difference.
Sure. All the Bill of Rights applies directly to the federal government. The reason that this was a good test case on the Second Amendment is that the Washington, D.C. City Council, because it is the National Capital District created by the Constitution, all the Washington, D.C. City Council's powers are mere grants from Congress. Congress could run the district itself directly, as it did for many years, or it could delegate many of its powers to the district to exercise home rule. So the ruling in Heller about the Second Amendment makes the Second Amendment enforceable as a meaningful individual right to the entire federal government, whether that's the federal government, you know, governing the Marianas Trust territory, or or any place else, and certainly in Washington D.C. as well, or any law passed by Congress. The Supreme Court held sometime before the Civil War that the Bill of Rights does not directly apply to the states. Congress, after the Civil War, partly in response to how racist, unreconstructed white governments were disarming the former slaves so they could then be attacked by the Ku Klux Klan, passed the 14th Amendment. And there's been a lot of historical debate about whether the 14th Amendment makes the Bill of Rights enforceable against the states. Where we currently are legally is the Supreme Court has made much but not all of the Bill of Rights enforceable against state and local governments, and the issue of whether the Second Amendment is still up in the air. It's one of the things that might get resolved by the new suits that have been filed against Chicago's handgun ban.
And so for those of us who see this victory as truly a terrific victory and think, wow, this is going to wipe out all these gun control laws, we'll finally be able to get rid of lots of these regulations, that's not going to happen, is it?
No, and that of course was the position of the the brief I wrote, as you know, for the Independence Institute, and a whole large law enforcement coalition, 29 California district attorneys, the Maryland State Fraternal Order of Police, San Francisco Police Veteran Officers Associations, and lots of, and 31 state attorneys general also joined it, not my brief, wrote their own brief on support of the pro-rights side of the Heller case, as did another brief filed by a large coalition of district attorneys. And of course, they explained to the court that recognizing an individual right does not mean that it's going to wipe out all gun control laws. I mean, the idea that it would was really sort of a fantasy of, you know, some of the most extreme people, perhaps at both ends of the gun debate, and was, you know, used by some of the anti-gun groups in their fundraising. Right, but it was never a realistic
And that concession must make the campaign feel pretty good, that this is not going to wipe out the tens of thousands of gun regulations and gun laws across the nation. But it does.
There were tens of thousands. May I again quote Brady? After the Heller ruling, as before, approximately 80 Americans, on average, will continue to die from guns every day. That's just the statistic across the United States. Our weak or non-existent gun laws contribute to the thousands of senseless gun deaths and injuries in this country that occur every year.
Right. And that's the official Brady response. So,
I'm not through yet.
Go
Hang
ahead.
on. We must continue to fight for sensible gun laws to help protect our families and our communities. Our fight to enact strong gun laws to save lives will be undiminished by the Supreme Court's decision in D.C. versus Heller. It remains too easy for dangerous people to obtain dangerous weapons in this country, and we must solve that problem.
And how do you hope on solving that problem?
We need some realistic enforceable things to go on. There are many other ordinances, laws that could be enacted. Part of the problem is that nobody's really interested, as far as I can tell, on the gun rights side, in making laws that really work.
Like what? Can you give me a particular? What gun laws are we looking at?
At one point, the huge gun show that's held at the, and the name escapes me of the place, I-25.
Merchandise Mart.
There you go. Thank you very much. And that's, I think, maybe the largest one in the nation. At
Not
that
even
time,
close.
Well, it's big enough for me, trust me. And they...
Have you ever been to it?
I refuse to touch a gun. Why would I go in that atmosphere, which would make me very uncomfortable?
Well, why would you take away my ability to go to it?
I'm not taking that away. What my point was that a background check was required for someone buying a gun in that atmosphere. However, somebody could say, well, don't want to get a background check. You know, it's about time for me to go to Wendy's for supper. And they could go across the street and finish the transaction there. And there is a Wendy's across the street from the Merchandise Mart.
My larger question was, what particular gun laws will the Brady campaign and your organizations be promoting in light of the Heller decision?
We need to look at the attack weapons that we have out there on the streets, the AK-47s, the modified Tech-9s, that are assault weapons that can be used for nothing but to hurt other people. You can't go hunting with those because you wouldn't have enough left from a deer to make hamburger with if you had a deer with them. We need to regulate those.
Let's bring it over here. Now, this doesn't mean there's an end to gun regulations. I wish that this applied to a lot of other states, but realistically, give me a for instance. What does this mean as we go forward working for or against gun rights?
It means, I think, we're all in agreement here that the vast majority of issues are going to continue to be decided in the state legislatures and the city councils and other places. The courts are, I hope, going to get involved as when they started for the first time in the 1930s, giving judicial protection to the First Amendment, and started again for the first time in the 1930s, doing at least their first baby steps to enforce the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. That doesn't mean they were going to wipe out every Jim Crow law, for example, when they started striking down a few of them. And likewise, judicial action, I think, is only realistic to expect for the most extreme laws. For example, in San Francisco public housing, if you live there, you can't own any gun. That seems pretty unfair that if you live in public housing, you have to give up your constitutional rights. Likewise, in New York City, they have a gun licensing system for permits to carry a gun where if you're, say, someone who clearly really needs a gun, maybe you're a crime witness who's been receiving death threats